Hey, everybody. It's episode 1 of series 2 of UIO, the podcast for teen girls. Hugs to everyone, and thank you for joining UIO, the podcast for teen girls. It is for you and about you inside out. I am Sonja Lewis, your host. Today we're looking at identity and some of its challenges. What does your gender marker, alongside other factors such as race, socioeconomic status, and so on, have to do with who you really are? And how do you deal with the stereotypes around identity markers? Make opportunities out of them. We have 2 guests today to help us with these tough questions to do with identity. Co-founders of Sisterhood, a social enterprise all about turning girls' self-doubt into self-confidence through creativity. Welcome, Rachita, Saraogi, and Rebecca Thomson. Really exciting to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having us. It's an absolute pleasure to be.
Thank you. So we do want to hear more about Sisterhood and the wonderful waves you're making. But first, let's talk about what being a girl really means these days. What does it have to do with true identity? In her TED Talk in India in 2009, playwright, performer, feminist, and activist Eve Ensler declares that there is a girl cell in all of us, and we've been taught to suppress it. She says being a girl is so powerful that we've had to train everyone not to be that. I get this. I really do. And it's really one of the reasons why I started UIO, was to reinstate pride in being a girl. Anyhow, Eve says being a girl connotes some sort of vulnerability or weakness, when vulnerability is perhaps one of our greatest strengths as humans. I suppose her point is that everyone ought to take a few pointers from girls, embrace the positive associations with being a girl. Cry if you feel it, be compassionate about life, take the lead, have empathy for others. And so I just want to talk to you both about how can girls embrace this girl cell and continue to assert themselves?
Yeah, so we encourage the girls at Sisterhood to really push the boundaries of femininity. Femininity doesn't come in one size. It's not a one size fits all for everybody. It's really chance, and you really need to change and push the boundaries of what femininity means to you. It's good if we see femininity coming in all shapes, sizes, characters, and attributes, and we need to see more of these being portrayed, not only in the media, but out in society. And if you can find a very specific representation of a girl, it's limiting. I think it is changing slowly, but it's got a long way to go.
I mean, it makes sense because there's so many different ways just to be yourself. There are stereotypes. How can girls oppose these stereotypes? Eradicate the negativity that people identify with girls without compromising who they are.
I think if we take a leaf out of Eve Ensler's poem that she performed during her TED Talk, where she says, "I love being a girl. I'm an emotional creature." And something that we found when we've been doing our programs is actually creating an environment where girls are allowed to embrace those stereotypes, where it's, yes, I am an emotional creature, absolutely. And sometimes it will happen that we play into those stereotypes, we play into those characteristics. But as long as it's genuine, we always tell them, as long as it's genuine to you, does it really matter? And does it have to be opposed?
I was watching BBC Breakfast, an episode with Cuba Gooding Jr., in which Charlie State and Louise Minchin were interviewing him about his role in Chicago. And revealing his reaction at landing the role of Billy Flynn, he confessed, "I cried like a little girl." That's true, he said. And then he said, "I said it. I cried like a little..." Oh my goodness, he said that word. Mm-hmm. I can't say it here. And I was watching and I went, oh my goodness. And my recollection is that Charlie State told him, "You can't say that," followed by an apology from the actor. And then later on, when I went to find that, to research it and to see what everybody else was saying about it, the worst bit for me was not just that he said it, but much of the coverage was about him sort of getting out of control and swearing on air. Nobody really, from what I could tell, maybe I'll be challenged and someone will show me that someone wrote about it, but there was very little bit said about what he actually said and how demeaning it was to girls.
You know you've embraced your girl cell when you don't wince at a comment like that.
Yes.
Because you know that these attributes really serve you well. You're crying and your emotional intelligence and being in touch with your emotional side has only ever given us success with sisterhood and connecting with girls on a deeper level. So I think you really know you've embraced your girl cell when you don't wince, but it could have major implications for someone who's hearing that for the first time.
Yeah.
Some of our girls, our teenage girls, that is insulting. However, I think what we say as for eradicating negativity, and we always try and really enforce this with the girls, is that responsibility really lies with the person who said it.
That's true.
And who's expelling that energy outward. And we try and get them to understand that you can't change other people. You can take them to water, but you can't make them drink. When things like that happen, keep focusing on your girl cell. It's your superpower, is what we would probably say, I would say. And stop trying to change other people. That's
really good, because I've learned something. I'm going to embrace my superpower because I did wince. We've talked about what girls can actually do, and I think that's an amazing answer because I'd never really thought about that. But what can we do as adults? Because, again, I was a bit concerned that it didn't receive the coverage that I thought that it should have received on what he had actually said. And maybe I'm wrong. And I'd just like to hear your take on that.
I think one thing that we see in terms of like as adults and in society, what we can do is encourage kids not to always follow what their friends do. It's really easy to fall into that pattern, to want to be part of the crowd, but actually let them allowed to explore avenues and really experiment with what they like and don't like and who they are and who they aren't. For example, if a lot of the girls who come and play the football club that we work with, Hackney Laces, a lot of them spoke about how their fathers encouraged them to play football. And and that's just a sign of really great parenting, because what happened is they didn't restrict their daughters because they're girls, right? And talking about that girl cell, they bring their emotional selves to football completely. They get fiery one minute when they don't score a goal, and then they're upset the next and crying on the bench if their team hasn't won. What happened is that now the parent and the child have a shared passion.
That's really good.
As an adult or as someone who is who wants to be a role model for particularly young girls, there's no better way than actually giving them that avenue and be like, hey, I really like this. Do you want to try it too?
That's really good. And I think there's something to say about, loving who you are, embracing, that superpower, that girl cell and everything, and learning and growing your space and challenging things that don't work for you, while trying not to leapfrog into adulthood, because I think it's kind of tricky. And I want to talk about that a little bit, because there are so many factors that threaten to dictate who you are. Gender is one of them that we're talking about, but it can also be race. It can be, religious background. We've had some things to come up on that. Sexuality, your social media profiles and your abilities. And I want to talk about, how do you see beyond the filters, come to understand who you really are, your true self, and make the best of it in the space you're in, as a teen girl?
That's a very big question. And I think something that we found that isn't mentioned a lot, that it is a lifelong journey.
Yes.
It takes a lot of time. And particularly when you're a teenager, my gosh, you're going through so many changes. You're learning so much about yourself. And to be honest, so are we. Rebecca and I, whenever we're doing our programs, we're always transparent about that. Actually, this program is just as much for us as it is for the teenage girls that we work with. We're constantly challenged every day with situations of, okay, which path am I going to choose? Am I going to choose the path of least resistance and believe what someone is saying about me and believe that to be true? Or am I going to really embrace my true self in whatever particular situation I find myself in? And that really comes down to knowing your values and holding yourself accountable to that.
Yeah. And and we do this in our program. So it's all about very practical, hands-on ways of getting past the filter and like making the most of the space. We really like this question because at the start of every program, what we do is we ask the girls what sort of space do they want to come into every day. And we do a thing called Sister Speak. So it's an exercise. And we just ask them, what sort of space would you like to walk into when you're with us? And everyone contributes, but everything that they contribute, they are accountable for, and they have to be able to act it out. We're very big on actions speak louder than words at Sisterhood. And you are accountable for that. One, you can put as many on the wall as you want, but you have to know that you have to be able to live up to them.
Yes.
And then also all the other girls that have contributed to the Sister Speak, they're things maybe you want to work towards. And we use this as a tool at the beginning of every session to come back to what are they going to work towards. A one that always comes up is make the most of it. So our Sisterhood programs aren't forever. And they're very fast paced, and there's live briefs where they're working on exciting projects for people. It's amazing that then goes hand in hand with be yourself. So it's like making the most of it, but being yourself and being true to yourself. And it's their favorite. Every time we get them to vote every week, what one is the most important to you? It's either one of these two. I think that's really changed the program for us, is that it's theirs. It's their space, and more places can do that. It's very easy. You just need to ask the people what kind of environment they want to be in and make it happen.
I think that's really good. But, each girl is an individual. It's a wonderful program, and it sounds like it gets each girl to tap into who she is on. And this sort of brings me to talking status, race, and privilege. And I really love Mallory Blackman's Noughts and Crosses. I think it's a wonderful read. I read it from cover to cover on a transatlantic flight, and there was this guy sitting beside me going, you finished that book? I said, yeah, I did. And it was exciting. And as a writer, I've come to understand that when you set out to write something, you know what you want it to be about. But everybody else decides what it's about, whether it's your agent, your publisher, or the readers. And in my case, I don't know exactly what she wanted it to be about. But to me, it's really about finding your true self. It's about, these, the teenage girl and the teenage boy. And for people who don't know the book, Seffi is a member of the dark-skinned privileged crosses, the ruling class, and Callum, her childhood friend. He's a naught. The lower class. His mother works for her family. They grow up, they fall in love. She just sort of turns things on its head. And only then does the filtering of identities come into play. The privilege, the race, the love is forbidden. Callum and Seffi have to dig deep to find out who they really are, their true self, what defines their life experiences. But talk to us about how privilege, class impacts a girl's identity.
You're right. It massively, we can see it massively impacts a girl's identity. Even speaking of like privilege and class, what we always try to do is draw upon from our own experiences and bring that to the session. Even though we've been privileged enough to go to university and get a degree, but even that has come at an expense. And setting up our own business, that's a whole different kettle of fish. We've always been amongst the youngest whenever we've been in incubators or panels or events, anything like that. It just so happens that Rebecca and I have always been amongst the younger set. And our counterparts have earned their money, and after earning their money, they've set up their own businesses or have the network to the resource that they need. However, but both of us don't. We both work other jobs and as freelancers to fund Sisterhood so far from normal funding streams. And one thing we really want to show the girls is that you don't have to be limited by your privilege and your class to be able to do something that you really want to do. You can be really resourceful and be really innovative and be clever with what you have at hand and still do and be who you want to be.
That's really good. I mean, because it's role modeling. And I think a part of the UIO is you inside out. But for me, it's, sort of a IOU, you, I actually owe. And I may be one of those people who's well beyond your age. But I think it's amazing that, you as young women are able to do this sort of modeling, because I was privileged to be at a conference for teenage girls this year, and the girls or the young ladies on the panel were perhaps your age, or, slightly a little bit younger and some a little bit older. And that was the best part of the conference for the teenage girls. They loved it. They loved to be able to relate. So that's wonderful. Just really modeling and showing them what it's all about. And that leads to careers. I mean, and I think careers are often identity markers in our society. And some roles are more male dominated while others are more female dominated. And as adults, we all experience it. And women talk about the glass ceiling. But I personally think to worry about this as a teenager, seems to take something away from the space that you're in. Planning for the future has its place. I'm all for it. And so can you talk to us about how being identified as a girl can influence study choices and whether or not to participate in sports, which is something you have experience with?
Yeah, absolutely. So we see that with our program where we provided design work experience for girls, and it was a very new thing, and they couldn't, it was not really an option. And you think, okay, if they've not even experienced something creative or design related, then that's limiting in choices or further down the line what they might think about doing. Being identified as a girl, it really can influence, especially if you have a school that might be leading you down a particular path, or the work experience availability isn't there. There's not variety. There's not loads of choice. Or again, as we sort of drew upon earlier, is that you might follow where your friends go, and that will be comfortable. But it will not, if you get there on the first day and you're like, this isn't for me. Yeah. It's about valuing that time as a teenager, getting the most out of it and enjoying time, which I think me and Rachita would both say, make the most of it. Yes. And try everything, and just don't limit yourself to what might be deemed as quite a male dominated space. The girl cell has its place. You need masculine and feminine qualities in every shape and form, in every industry. You can bring such a different perspective, and it might feel uncomfortable at first if you are the only girl in the room, but you will feel that you're making a difference in that sense as well, because there could be a younger girl that's coming up and they see you there in that classroom, and they think, I want to be there too. I want to be doing this subject. And she's awesome. Like, go for I want to be that. So you don't really realize you're being a role model if you do make a decision that you want to make. But we understand that making decisions that you want to make is also a privilege. So you can have pressures from parents or society or communities that you should maybe be in a very particular job role and take a very specific path. So we understand that doing something you enjoy doesn't feel like a possibility. But at the end of the day, it's you picking that option for and what you're doing. And you've got to do it every day. So, why don't do something that you're really passionate about, you can contribute to. And I don't just mean that at school with subjects. I mean jobs, careers. You've got to have a passion for it, and it's got to get you up in the morning, and it's got to, if you can pay the bills, that's important. We understand that having your dream comes at a cost, but
Yes. I know many of the young women on this panel. It was called Rocking Your Teens, this conference that I was at. And many of the young women on the panel spoke about the pressures from parents, for example. And I think it is important, to have the privilege to be able to do what you love, which leads us to this whole idea of sense of belonging. And I think sense of belonging is so key to identity. And I think that's why we've got so many issues around peer pressure, for example, and wanting to fit in. And that just transcends all generations, doesn't it? But let's say you have concern, you've overcome the battles of being held back because of these identity markers. You're doing whatever you want to do. You're passionate about it. You're excited. You can see the change, and you've opened doors, whether it's sports, education, whatever, and then you return home. And I say home, it could be to your friends back in the community. You went off to do something else, and then you came back. There's a pit in your stomach because suddenly you don't feel like you belong anymore. And I was listening to another TED Talk. Elizabeth Nyamomero speaks of her heart-wrenching thing in her TED Women's Talk in 2015. It's called An Invitation to Men Who Want a Better World for Women. She had to leave her village in Zimbabwe because of a famine. Her grandmother was raising her, and she went to school in the city with an auntie and so on. And she had a really good experience there. But when she returned, there was no longer the sense of belonging. And I kind of know how this feels. As a woman who lives in another country and who is married to someone from a different race, how can you maintain the sense of belonging and stay true to yourself?
I think it's something that girls go through, and making sense of it is so difficult. But we've tried to simplify it in a way that makes you just accept it, and it kind of brush over you. So it's a poem from Rupi Kaur's book called The Sun and Her Flowers, which we read all the time. And it goes like this. It says, it was when I stopped searching for home within others and lifted the foundations of home within myself, I found there was no roots more intimate than those between a mind and body that have decided to be whole. So I think what she talks about here is, but that sense of belonging literally starts within you. And if you can be yourself and you can be in a space and you don't have to be like other people, that's when you know you're around the right people. So it is difficult to stand alone and to just do something and maybe not feel that everyone is behind you. But funnily enough, over time, people come out the woodwork and they are rooting for you, but they might just not be where you are at. And you have to just go, we'll be there at one point. Our paths will cross again.
Yeah. And I think it's wonderful because I don't want people to have to wait until they're my age. I won't say what it is to, understand these things. And this is just so exciting to know that you've got these kind of programs and you're talking to girls about this kind of thing. And I'm excited to be able to get more, hear this message. But we can't have a podcast nowadays without talking about social media.
Of course.
So what does social media have to do with individual and collective identity of today's teen girls?
I think you asked a question about filters earlier, and I literally just went straight to social media, and I was like, it's coming up. Yes. So yeah, I was sort of thinking about filters, and they're fun and amazing technology that you use on social media or on all your photographs. I'm talking specifically. But I think it's good to know that as long as you're aware that filters are not reality or a better version than you, that they're harmless if you are aware of that. The state of, or the current climate of social media I see is influencers promoting diet pills, which is just an irresponsible way to utilize their influence and their platform and their following. And this sort of endless highlight reels is not a sustainable way to live. Like life, it has its ups and downs, and the everyday is beautiful as well. And it's human, and it makes you more relatable at the moment.
And something that we really do, what we realized that at first, our initial knee-jerk reaction is like, oh, well, we need to restrict young people from using, these platforms. And, we need to, this is not good. It's not healthy, which of course, many aspects of it isn't. But we also soon realize it's not about eradicating social media.
Yes.
It's not about restricting girls from using it.
Yeah,
but
they're not going to stop.
They're not going to stop, right?
I mean, it's a great tool.
Yeah. And exactly as Rebecca said, it's actually, if you give them the tools to create a space within that can be used for good. Yes. That can be used to affirm the positive. That's possible. There are people doing that within the realm of social media. It's happening in very small pockets.
Yes.
But what if, and that's the dialogue that we want to change.
Okay.
And as an example of this, one of our most recent projects that we did with School 21, who are based in Stratford, their project is called We Recognise, and they're using Instagram as a digital platform to use storytelling to encourage young girls to embrace natural beauty, and not just as natural beauty as you are, but from diverse cultures.
Yes.
As well. So this is like an example of, social media, how can we use it as a tool that will actually flip that narrative, where it's not going to restrict them to seeing what they're seeing, but it will change what they see.
Yes, that's really amazing. And it really comes down to, I think what you're both saying is keeping it real. And that's really important. Well, we're getting to the end, but we've talked a little bit about sisterhood and everything, but we'd like to hear more. Tell us briefly about sisterhood. Tell us more. It's quite exciting, and how girls can actually get involved, because you talked about, some of the ways that you're working with girls. And so girls are listening. How can they get involved?
So Sisterhood is a social enterprise, and as you said, we work with young girls. Our main aim is to turn their words into actions. We use what is called design thinking to as a tool for them to design projects that about issues that they care about or affect their everyday life. So we typically work with schools. We work with after-school clubs. So if you would like us to come to your school, you can find us at oursisterhood.co.uk. And or if you want us to come to your community centres, we partner with local community centres, and we deliver a range of programs, and each program is completely dictated by either a problem that a school has identified or something that the girls themselves are actually we want to change that. We want to have a go at changing that. And we just create a space for girls to flex their creative muscles,
yes,
to allow them to experiment and fail and learn from failing,
yes,
and just think freely and also consciously, having that social conscious that actually it doesn't matter if I'm 15 years old, I still, I have a voice, I have a mind, and I'm going to use that to,
yes,
to do something good with it.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. So before we get out of here, we'd love some hot tips for girls on how to stay true to themselves. Yeah. So from each of you.
Let's give you some top tips. Finding out what you don't like is as important, if not more important, I think, than finding out what you do like to do. This means try lots of things, and some things will stick and some things won't. And that's great. That's progress. It's amazing how many people go into something and just do it for the sake of it and don't try something else and go, I'm just going to leave this where this is. This was a great experience, but I'm going on and I'm trying something else.
Cool.
Another thing, I think, so taking time to be with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think, as odd as that sounds, one of the best advice that I ever got was learn to enjoy your own company.
Yes.
And that's something that I think the sooner you do that, the better you'll be. Like, really become best friends with yourself.
Yes.
And this comes, it's a process, but it comes with reflecting and learning and absorbing the experiences that you're going through and that are happening around you. So yes, definitely become your best friend. Amazing
tips and an amazing interview and information from both of you. Thank you so much for being our guest today on UIO. And we hope that we'll be able to stay in touch. And we do ask girls to send in their questions. And if they do, we hope that both of you will be able to participate, whether it's online or, through my blog or whatever, and answering some of the questions that they might have about identity. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that is a wrap for UIO, Your Identity Inside Out. Very inspirational show with lots of great takeaways from Rachita and Rebecca. Thank you, girls, for listening, and thank you, God, for the opportunity to do the show. Today, I want to pray for the complex topic of identity for girls all over the world to rise above stereotypes, leap over hurdles, and develop fully as girls transitioning into women. Also, we pray that girls will take pride in being girls, whatever their identity markers, and the world, from government to school to families, will support them in their journeys to a happier, healthier teen years. I ask these blessings in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Tune in 2 weeks for the next episode of UIO for some straight talk with Eleanor Seagal, a journalist and writer who writes and talks about her personal battle with mental illness. Join me then. Until then, hit me up on Twitter at Sonja Lewis, Instagram at Sonja D. Lewis, Facebook on thisandthat.co.uk. Tell me what you want to hear about on UIO podcasts and keep sending those questions on any of the episodes. Take care of you inside out, and remember, it is UIO.